Welcome to Essentials for Adoption Attuned Parenting, a podcast exploring how parents can best relate and connect to their adopted child. If you have adopted, or even if you are thinking about adopting, this is the show for you. Discover tips and tools for adoption attuned parenting. This is the podcast for building a strong foundation for your adoptive family. And now, from growing intentional families together, here are your hosts, coaches, and adoptive parents, Susan, David, and Gayle Swift.
Hi, this is Susan from San Diego. Welcome to the Essentials for Adoption Attuned Parenting. I'm so glad you could join us. As always, I'm here with my co-host, adoption coach, author, adoptee activist, and my colleague at Growing Intentional Families Together, Gayle Swift. Good morning, Gayle.
Good morning, Susan. You know, we're recording this episode just a few days after Christmas. I thought we could discuss ways to strengthen ourselves as adoptive parents. You and I are both looking forward to the new year, so I thought that was a good way to start.
Sounds great, Gayle. You know, I'm always up for making resolutions. I do that every year. So one of the things that I do, and probably a lot of people do this, would be to reflect on what I want to be doing in the next year as far as my personal, professional goals, new things that I want to do or maybe learn. And of course, you know, I include those exercise goals and maybe even health goals. So I look forward to talking about, you know, this idea of resolutions kind of in a different way. Maybe I would say the big umbrella, and that umbrella is making us stronger as adoptive parents.
Right. That's a great idea. And I'd like to first reassure our holiday-weary listeners that we are not going to burden them with more stuff they ought to do. You know, we hear far too many oughts in our lives, right? So I don't know about you, Susan, but for me, once the holiday's over, I often feel kind of a sense of letdown. You know, so much anticipation, effort, and planning precede the holidays, and then in a flash, it's over.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's not burden with the to-do list.
Right. So you asked me what resolutions that I might propose for our listeners to consider. And my first suggestion, really basic, be kind and considerate of themselves and their own needs. You and I frequently mention Dr. Bruce Perry because he's an internationally renowned expert on trauma. And he asserts that the best way we can serve the needs of children who have experienced trauma is to take care of the parents who love them and the teachers who school them. So let's focus on the parents today. Doesn't that sound a bit revolutionary to take care of ourselves and that will help our kids?
Revolutionary, I'm not sure about, but I do know that as parents, we often are too busy or are distracted, rightly so many times, but we're distracted and we're at the last on the list.
Exactly. And, you know, our hearts are really into being intentional parents and committed parents and loving parents, but still all these shoulds and oughts, and it can get exhausting. So I'd like to add one more point to the idea that by meeting our own needs, instead of denying them or taking them on like exhausted martyrs, we actually increase our ability to meet the needs of our children and partners when we take care of ourselves. One thing that came to mind, I was playing with my grandson, PJ. He loves to play this game called balanced chairs, which is little stackable plastic chairs that you pile one on top of the other, each taking a turn, until finally the entire stack tumbles into a heap. Now, I'm sure we've all played this or a similar game and laughed uproariously when everything came crashing down. But when it is us crashes into a heap, it doesn't feel funny. It's discouraging and often leaves us feeling like a failure. So my suggestion number one, I'm going to repeat, is acknowledge and meet your own needs. Offer yourself the same grace, empathy, and patience that you would offer a friend. Be your own friend.
Good idea. Be your own friend. I'm going to remember that. Post-it note, put on the refrigerator. Suggestion number 2 is focus on finding joy. So I hear that a lot, find joy, all of that. So I looked it up, and from this psychotherapist, Jude Bijou, she says that joy is really just a physical sensation of some emotion. When I think about finding joy, I don't really think about having to look for it, but I see the point in being intentional about recognizing or creating it since, and this is that psychologist that I looked up. She said, when we feel joy, we feel great about ourselves. We feel confident, powerful, capable, lovable, and fulfilled. So, Gayle, these are all good reasons that we should experience more joy in our life. And I'm going to be intentional about it. I'm going to find joy.
Absolutely. It's a great idea to be intentional. So, like many of our listeners, Susan, in our family, we used to take annual holiday photos to send out as our Christmas card. And this ties into our joy conversation. The kids were good sports, but they really viewed taking a family photo as a chore. Now, however, they laughed themselves silly over one particular photo that we took when they were about 5 and 7. The photographer caught them both rolling their eyes while totally unaware. George and I are blissfully smiling like it was a Hallmark photo. We ended up choosing that snapshot for our Christmas card, and it was a huge hit with our friends and extended family because it was such a universal family moment. It was joy, This is what families are really like, not like the picture perfect Hallmark version.
That's a great story, Gayle. And it reminds me of the next suggestion, which would be celebrating wins. So celebrating small wins in our life, hey, I did that, stimulates a dopamine release in our brain. And that's a feel-good chemical that reinforces the learning experience and strengthens our sense of connection to those we work with or those we live with. Celebrating wins, Gayle, is really important. Oftentimes, this is kind of related to we don't think about ourselves or be our best friend. Oftentimes, we don't stop to celebrate what we've accomplished or some small measure of success, right? We just pass right over it. So suggestion number 3 is celebrate the wins.
Well, and if I can tie that right back to the conversation around the silly photograph, George and I could have gotten annoyed with the kids for not cooperating in the picture, but instead we were able to recognize this is actually pretty funny. Let's send this card out instead. So it turned out it was a point of a win instead of a point of parents being annoyed with their kids.
Yeah.
So yes, celebrate wins in our family lives and within ourselves.
What's next? Practicing gratitude. Okay, so this is another one like find joy. It's kind of a cliche. So I looked it up and I thought, well, what is this idea of practicing gratitude? And also this idea of beginning a gratitude practice kind of feels like cheesy or overwhelming. So keep in mind, it doesn't have to be difficult. So this is what I do. I like to think about the things in my life that I'm thankful for when I go to sleep at night and when I get up in the morning. That kind of thing reminds you of the things that you have in your life.
That's a great idea. When I'm coaching my clients, I often suggest that they create practices to remind themselves of some of their intention, like this intention to practice gratitude. It could be as simple as a little sticky note with praying hands on it to remind you to be thankful. It's a great way to start or end your day. And when you look in the mirror to brush your teeth at night, there's that little sticky note that says, remember, let's be grateful. Because it's so easy to get caught up in how our day fell short of our expectations. What we did wrong, what the kids did wrong, what the hubby did wrong. Instead, if we look to practice gratitude, our eyes focus, our minds focus, our hearts focus on what went right. And that's much more productive and healthy, really.
They did a study, and so you have on people who express gratitude. And so what they found out is improved mental health, improved physical health, stronger social bonds, And another thing, it helps in becoming resilient, right? Because life does have its ups and downs. And so we want to have resiliency so that we can refocus our negative energy into more positive force.
It's also a great example to set for our kids, to teach them to practice gratitude. It's not necessarily something that they naturally intuit.
Right.
It's a skill like everything else. It's a practice.
So, Gayle, we promised that we would honor our holiday weary listeners. So we're coming close to the end of our podcast because we're keeping it 20 minutes rather than our normal 30. So let's review what our suggestions would be as we think about strengthening ourselves as adoptive parents. Number one, what was number one? It was focus on yourself. Be a good friend to yourself.
Exactly.
Number two, focus on finding joy. Number three, this one tied into your Christmas card. Celebrate wins. And finally, practice gratitude.
Indeed. I am grateful for you as my colleague, for the rest of the Growing Intentional Family coaches. I'm grateful we have this podcast as an opportunity to share our insights, skills, and experience with our listeners.
So to our listeners out there, I'll add, have a wonderful, happy new year. When this podcast broadcasts, it'll be like 3 weeks in. So hopefully you put some of these suggestions to good work.
There you go. It'll still be germane. So remember that these are our observations as coaches and adoptive parents, and we know that each person and family are unique, and their experiences may be different from ours.
Yet our hope is that you'll consider adoption attunement practices as a guide for parenting your adoptive family.
We invite you to share your experiences with us. We'd love to hear them. Go to the Growing Intentional Families Together Facebook page to place your comment. We invite folks also to visit our website, read our blogs. There's lots of good content there. And Susan, they can subscribe to our monthly newsletter too.
Tell us what's going on in your family and let's talk about it.
Again, you can contact us at giftfamilyservices.com.
That brings us to a close for today. I'm Susan from beautiful and always sunny San Diego.
And I'm Gayle Swift from an equally sunny place, Florida, the Sunshine State. And remember, adoption matters. Talk about it, read about it, learn about it. Till next time, so long.
Thank you for listening to Essentials for Adoption Attuned Parenting. If you liked the program, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help us spread the message about building strong and connected adoptive families. If you'd like more information about growing intentional families together and their adoption coaches, as well as to sign up for your free coaching consultation, visit giftfamilyservices.com. We have enjoyed being with you and invite you to join us again next time for another Essentials for Adoption Attuned Parenting.